We're rolling. Great.
Okay. So this is week 4, and I am the group leader this time. So we'll see how this goes. And so I had a question myself um, that was regarding the assets of the community and how Latinos they often struggled in school compared to other ethnicities practically. And and like there's like a huge statistic that like took place amongst this, like saying about it was almost like 66% like Latino students at one time were passing like this Texas test. It could have been like 86, and then like there was a 93% like white people. It's like some huge marginally district, um, ill proportioned um, uh, measurement that took place in between these two different ethnicities. So like one question that I had that, and I would say, and it asked me is like, what are some programs, services, and capacities that might help Latino students who are struggling with dropping out, gangs, low-income jobs, testing, etc.? What are some programs, services, and capacities that could help them? So um, I wasn't exactly sure how to answer this question exactly. Like I thought of like that we could have like more kind of after-school programs, such as like chess or even sports. But then again, like there's still even a lot of schools that still offer this, and still like you see like this a lot of kids that are still like joining gangs or dropping out and still having poor test scores. So I wasn't sure exactly how to come up with some kind of way that could incorporate it. And I'm totally open to ideas because you know I don't know.
I think just something that came to mind was for after school programs, you have to think about transportation, like reliable transportation for these students to get to and from school after school. And some districts have like activity buses, but not all schools and districts do it. Not every place where a student lives gets access to an activity bus. Like when I was in high school, if I did an after school activity, the activity bus would drop me off 2.5 miles away from my house. You know?
Wow.
So you have transportation to think about, and then you have like the responsibilities of the students. I think at home, like they're supposed to come home to help take care of the, like maybe like a sibling or something, and then they get, I don't know. But I think to address the problem, you have to figure out like why, like what's the root cause of the problem. So like with testing, for instance, it could be like the tests are worded in a very formal English type way, and that could be yeah, which could be troubling.
So, right, there's a lot of great points in there. Um, so one thing that also, because that made me think that like if there was like district-wide testing that took place where like all the tests were the same, um, or something like that. Because like you also said even something about like schools, and schools and like you're 2.5 hours away for your after-school activity, and
Do you want to speak up a little bit?
yeah. So you're 2.5 hours away from your school activity, and this just makes me think that like that this is one thing that often goes underlooked, often in the educational system, and uh, and uh, and it just makes me think that there are like multiple ways um, for this all to go about, as in there are other ideas too. Um, so I can't say if one's the best or anything, but I think those are some great points.
I also think that for after school activities, working with community assets, so working with organizations within the community is going to help because they're going to know the families that students who are going home to take care of, like siblings.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to know what certain interests there are within their students. They're going to know what their students need. So by having a school work with the community assets, you kind of get both sides. You get like the home life, and you also get the school life as well. So I think that could be one way to combat those statistics that are going on right now.
So you're talking about maybe like how the Whatcom YMCA has like after school programs that they go to, like the elementary schools, for instance, and they're there till like 5 o'clock type things. Is that what you're talking about?
Kind of, yeah. Even at Sterling Meadows, which is what Ali and I were talking about before this, it's a community that has, I'm not quite sure how to explain it, but it has a program within the community that helps the families that live there. Um, and so reaching out to those type of organizations that work closely with the families.
Okay.
So schools could also reach out to the YMCA for like transportation, as you're talking about, organizing transportation between school and then the after school activity. But then the school could also reach out to the community and try and find, again, what that, like, the root cause of the problem is, and then try and fill in the gaps that way, if that makes sense.
Does someone want to explain what Sterling Meadows is?
I did some service projects out there.
Did you do Sterling Meadows?
I didn't do Sterling Meadows for Kate's class, but I did it for my Spanish class.
But is it like a neighborhood? Is it an
It's like-
organization?
It's like a neighborhood slash co-housing.
Okay.
So it's houses that are there for Latino families, and within that community, there is an organization that helps. There's like a homework helping center, which is what I've worked with, and they help out with school and all of that. So it's I don't want to say like government funded housing, but it's an area where it's almost like an apartment block.
Yeah.
Where these Latino families live. So that's what my understanding of Sterling Meadows is. I'm sure I can look it up and have a more formal definition.
Well, I didn't really know what it was, so.
I don't really. I remember hearing about it in one of
Yeah.
the classes, but I never worked there. I think it's interesting as you guys are talking. There's kind of these two spheres. You were talking about how there's this group that kind of struggles academically, like you were talking about the Latino test scores versus the white test scores in Texas, and you guys are talking about like community, and so I think it's really interesting how there's kind of this social sphere that ties in very closely with the students' academic performance, that a lot of like aiding in their academics, the things that we talk about are like, well, how can the community get involved in these things, that kids that have more social interaction, reason to be in school and want to stay in school are going to be more likely to do better academically as well. So I don't know. I think it's really important to have the community involved like that. And I was thinking even, especially like parents, what sort of things can like teachers do to bring parents into the classroom, or motivate parents to help with after school activities or something, to get whole families involved with the students' academics and support, instead of just that student and other people of the community or teachers or whatever.
Well, I worked with a Latino girl at Shuxon, and she like said her parents worked really late and stuff. So like I don't think her parents were involved in her schooling. Like they wanted her to go, but they weren't really involved. Like her sister was pregnant and she was only 15, and she'd have to go home and help with the baby. And it's like I don't think the parents, like, because they're trying, to like live there, like to help as much as maybe we think they can.
And I remember it was really interesting as I was reading one of the sections. I don't remember which article it was, but it was saying that there's often a stigma that like Latino families don't care as much about their students' education, which is not true. But it's like kind of the economic background behind it that causes them. They don't have as much money to buy the educational tools or the at-home study books, and or have the time to sit and read with their kid as much if they're at work or something. So there's that whole social component that complicates like their availability to support their students' education, but it doesn't mean they actually care less. stigma.
Was it in this article that they were talking about how like undocumented children or children of undocumented parents can't get health care?
That was this one.
I think so. I mean,
That ended up being part of the article.
Oh, I can't remember.
I remember there was like even multiple different types of like documentation too that took place.
Yeah, I just remember being like shocked at. I mean, like, I haven't had healthcare for like a certain amount of time in my life, and of course, like, you get, you're in the emergency room and you don't have healthcare, and the thousands of dollars, and it's like you can't even afford to have healthcare. So how are you gonna afford to like? But it's and then you're missing school, and then you're missing school because you're sick, and then your parents aren't there to take care of you because they're working and they're super stressed because of money, and you have, I don't know. When I heard that, I was just, oh my gosh, like they're not even allowed to have it. I don't know if I read that right, but
I think I remember that too. I remember the one article. I don't know if I'm mixing up my classes now. I think it was from this class. That was talking about. No, it was a different class, but it's relevant, so I'm gonna bring it up. But I was doing some reading for a different class about indigenous Mexican people who migrate to the United States. So like not native Spanish speakers, like speakers of an indigenous language in Mexico, and how they come up and if they're undocumented, they don't have the health care access either, and they also have much higher rates of like poor health conditions than even average like Mexican students or other, especially white students. Because was it this article?
okay,
because they're like working.
49.
Yeah, okay, it was. I am mixing up my classes. Yeah, I was really surprised by that too. Just that, like, because it said like they're often working in the fields and they'll get like the crop dust, like all the pesticides sprayed on them or whatever, and so they have much lower quality, like health quality and so
life.
yeah, and so that compiled with this lack of health care is just like a double whammy of health problems that are solved.
I feel like that transcribes into school.
For sure.
And again, like an economic stability is totally important for the importance of healthcare. Because I think like healthcare is great. I think it's like important to have healthcare, because without that, then these kids, like people that are like become sick, and they can't go to school then as quickly or as often, even. And it's not that it's all like necessarily like a matter of time, but it's the fact that like they end up being stuck in this position um, of having a total like lack thereof of opportunity, as it seems, when it's like they could be given like the opportunity if they had a different that took place like in their lifetime.
Yeah, I think one thing that this kind of just reminded me of was that if you're undocumented, like you get the opportunity to go to public education, but then you are denied financial aid and post-secondary education. And so you have these students who are in the education system, and then maybe once they get to a certain grade level, it's like, what's the point? I'm never going to be able to afford to go to college, so why?
I don't remember if it was in this article or one of the other articles. But it was talking about like some students, they find out that they're undocumented when they try to apply for post-secondary education, because you need a social security number to apply for financial aid and for university. And some students are like, okay, mom and dad, where's my social security number? And they're like, oh, well, you don't have one. And then they find out that they're undocumented.
I remember reading that too. That's crazy.
That is
You could go until you were 18 or 19 and not
Well,
even
then what
know,
do you
just
do?
assume.
What do you do once you hit that point?
That I don't even know. Because you can't really get a real job without a social security.
What do you do?
Or like to get payroll, you know, like
Yeah,
all this stuff.
yeah, that's why they're what I talked about. There are much higher rates for undocumented people just to have under minimum wage jobs, jobs that are under the table and kind of thing, and all ties in, you know.
Yeah, there are like purposeful ways practically that'll take place where, like, you know, if someone grows up as being an undocumented, and then like their quinceañera or their bar mitzvah rolls around, like they don't have the opportunity to do it then, and then like this ends up like denying their um, adulthood rites of passage that take place.
Is this the
Yeah.
interrupted rites of passage that you're talking about in your post?
Mhm.
Yeah, I was kind of
Yeah.
confused about that, like, because it was, what was it? It was under like documented and undocumented, and then there was like
Yeah.
interrupted rites of passage.
Well, like getting your driver's license, for instance.
Ah, okay.
So like it's a rite of passage into adolescence, getting a driver's license, right? But now you're kind of socially excluded from that because you can't get a driver's license.
Mhm.
So you're just the older you get as an undocumented child, the more excluded you are from like these national types of like like social constructs.
And it included college in that as well.
Yeah,
kind of this
college.
phase of
Yeah.
moving into independence from your
So
parents.
if you come into the States, I guess, you can't get legal.
If you come into the United States illegally, can you become legal?
You can,
You
but one
just-
of the things
I
that
don't
it
know.
was like,
It's a way.
I'm so, like, I don't know why, but I've never really thought about this stuff.
yeah,
So I'm just kind of confused. Like, if you come here illegally, or like, how would you come here legally?
Well,
I guess.
sometimes what happens is that people will immigrate to the United States and be here on a visa.
Yeah.
And their visa will expire and they won't go in and renew it, which is how they become undocumented or illegal immigrants. Is because they were given permission to be here, but then
for a
that
short amount.
For a
for a
short
short
period
amount
of time.
but then that short amount of time
Fair enough.
expired and they didn't go in to renew their permission. to be here.
Or do you always get to renew? Like,
think-
Like what are
If
the
you-
limitations
I
on
think-
renewal?
The hope, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding, is that you go in with a visa and can apply and take the test for citizenship.
After a
But
certain period of time, right?
Okay, I'm not totally sure. But there are so many like wait lists to apply for citizenship that it takes like 7 years is the average. It's one of them said something about that, which is much longer than a visa is actually gonna like last. So then you just end up undocumented, and a lot of people just don't even try to get their documentation because it's like a decade process or whatever.
And so, like, a lot of people move here from, let's say, Mexico to here because Mexico is worse than being
Well, yeah,
undocumented here.
People like when you're thinking of like undocumented people who are coming into the United States, people are probably fleeing like bad situations, like in Venezuela, for instance, right now, or was it Syria last year, right? Or you have people who just want to, have a better life for their family. Like they want to give their children a better life, or they want to come here and work and make more money so that they can send money to their family back home. So, there's a whole bunch of reasons that people come into the United States.
I also think that there's like this perceived the American dream.
Yeah.
So
And it's not so.
it's
I
not.
think it's not what people expect.
I think it's glorified more than what is actually available. Because I think when people tell the stories of, oh, I moved to America and I became CEO of a company or something like that, there are so many trial and errors up until that point that people just don't. They hear about this land of opportunities, but they don't hear about all of the baggage that comes with that.
Right. It's like, even though it's the land of opportunity, it's literally like the land limited of opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing says you once you're in the country, then you can kind of make yourself, just build yourself up from the ground up very easily. And it's not as easy as there's a lot of ladders to climb. I remember being in Italy a couple years ago, my friend and I were traveling, and we were talking with a waiter at our restaurant. He's like, "You're from America?" Yeah, we're from America. And he's like, "Oh, I want to go so badly. I just want to take my son there so that he has like a young son, like 3 or 4 something, so that he can grow up there and not be here in Italy." And we're like in a nice Italian city. I don't remember where we were, but my friend they were like, "We kind of like it here. Like it's good for you here." But I mean, I don't know what sort of situation he's in. He may have something that he was needing to get away from, but it was. I just had never like experienced that so blatantly before. Like, man, I just dream about America all the time and the opportunities there. I didn't want to be like, "You're wrong, man," but like just hearing these stories of how much more difficult that actually is. Like, it's not as
There needs to be like a better process.
Mm-hmm.
But like speaking of like my grandparents came from Italy, fleeing kind of like Mussolini and like the fascist like regime. So and they came here because it's the land of the free. You can speak what you're. There they weren't allowed to be who they were. You had to like follow very strict kind of like and or Mussolini and so they came here for like the American dream, the land of opportunity. I don't know how they. I should ask how they got documented.
You're here.
I'm here in college.
Yeah. I think that the length of time that it takes to become documented has been steadily increasing. So perhaps it's an easier process.
Well, the process is so complicated that if I am a immigrant moving into the United States and I don't speak English, the prospect of like going into an office and having to fill out paperwork in a language that I don't know with people that I've heard that through the grapevine or whatnot, that it's a 7-year process. Like my motivation to go in and become documented just is so little.
Yeah. Especially if you're a speaker of a language other than Spanish, even because there's sometimes especially along border states, can be some Spanish interpretation. But if you're a speaker of like one of the indigenous languages in Mexico and you come up, it's going to be an extra added like complication and everything. Interpretation.
Should we get back to school or what?
Yeah.
So I think since we're talking about the whole entire migration thing and visas and also on documentation, there's also a lot of like instability that takes place when you come in at a low economic status into a country where you're trying to achieve like this whole entire American dream. Like as in like a year ago, be like completely different than it actually is like now. As in, like when you're at such you're at that low seemingly like economic state, you're coming in with the American dream. A lot can happen. As I said, like when we were talking about healthcare earlier, and the fact that if you don't have healthcare and like some major incident occurs, where like almost just like you end up like busting out a bone, that could happen a year ago, and then it's like, how do you end up like kind of mending for that now? It's really low odds of actually achieving the American dream, and that's almost like a reality that a lot of people that don't think through.
Also, going back to what we were talking about school, I don't know why this went through my head, but like you said something about sports, and in middle school or even high school, sports aren't free.
No, well, you can get scholarships. So like the school will give like, for instance, when we couldn't afford to, like, whenever I wanted to play football, we couldn't afford to pay like the athletic fee, which is what you're talking about. And they'll do like sponsorships and stuff, but it's still embarrassing.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people like realize that, because I think a lot of like Latinos, like at least from what I saw, like they don't play a lot of sports in high school, or even in middle school, in where I was from, and I never thought it was because I don't know, it's just it does you have to pay money to play sports, but it's supposed to like be one of those things where it's supposed to like help be involved.
And it takes a lot of like courage to admit that you can't afford like the $40 athletic fee or something, because that's how it was with me. Like it was like, oh my god, like it's so I can only imagine that they might feel the same way. But going back to like school and like undocumented status on students, that provides remind me, like a lot of uncertainty, and as humans, like we want more certainty, and so bringing in like community organizations where a student can have, and teachers that care about them, and community organizations that are there to help them and their families, that can provide like stability and like certainty in their lives, I think would help with like testing and what are you gangs and whatever you originally brought up, because it's harder to be productive and it's harder to be like academically motivated and successful, I think, when you have all this uncertainty surrounding you. Like if you're worried about am I gonna eat tonight? Do I have to babysit tonight? Are mom and dad gonna be okay? Is the government gonna take them back to their original country? Like how are you supposed to focus?
I know, I couldn't even imagine.
Because I mean, like we've all been through times where we've been like super stressed because of something like at home, I'm sure. And during that time, it's like, I know for me, it's like school's on the back burner because there's this almost like a constant state of emergency, and so you have to think about all that uncertainty that is coming into like a child's mind and how that's going to affect their performance, their motivation, and like what they might be involved in.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. Just like the children being involved in this conversation at home of like the like emergency action plan kind of okay, what do we do if mom and dad are taken, or if Uncle Joe or whoever, and that like young students have to be involved in this conversation. It's just not a stress that students of undocumented families have to deal with at all. Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of like respect that like must come into play when again like the uncertainty of being like of living at such a seemingly kind of instability of economic situation of equity that takes place. And so I was gonna go with this with we were talking about dropping out gains of low income jobs earlier in testing. That's one thing that we're trying to talk about. And to go back to that, because like when you're at this low economic state, there's a lot of pretty much a probability for that to always not necessarily like have to practically go into a gang, but there is the chance that like they could be in a gang at that low economic state, and and so for like that kind of, this is an all round like difficult situation for all these all these immigrants that are coming in with all this undocumentation, and so there must be kind of like this like selectivity that takes place of where like they'll practically have to select who's going to be like survival of the fittest, and that's almost like the reality of this low economic state. I hate to say it.
I think also though, like being in a gang is being a part of a community too. So like if a way for you to fit in your community with the people who are your age is to hang out with a gang, then and that's probably what you're gonna do, because like one of the things that us like as humans want is to belong.
Yeah.
So if that's the only place you feel like you belong, because you're in that, you have that sense of community, of brotherhood, or sisterhood, then you might be more prone to being in gangs.
And I think it's kind of an identity thing too. Like that's how you identify with this group, like the community thing, and especially for someone who is undocumented. There was this idea of liminality that it talked about, of like being kind of on the threshold of into this new group, but kind of stuck in this old group, and so you want, even more so, you're gonna want somewhere where you um, can have like, I don't really know what culture I'm fitting into right now, but I know I'm in this gang, and that's kind of an like a solid identity that you can have.
Right. Josie was talking about earlier, about how saying like community would be so important for these kind of after school programs. And that's just immediately like what I thought. That this is the community, and like a lot of people can love this like kind of community that'll take place, because I can't necessarily say that like I've had like not like any experience with the gang, like that's um, but there's always a lot of like I imagine like care that does like seem to uh, take place in gangs, but for one another, and it's that's something I don't really think about.
Something that you actually mentioned in your post as well is that cultural heritage creates a community. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like the movie that we watched, Precious Knowledge. That was a really good one. But the fact that they brought the culture into the classroom was that they created that community that those people were craving. So instead of going to a gang for that kind of community love, they were getting it in school.
Yeah. And so what I was confused about is, okay, so like one guy was telling like that was a good important thing to have that classroom, and then one was saying how it was dividing, right?
Right, that was the Arizona legislature.
Yeah. And I just thought that was really weird, because then you have two different sides to it. Mm-hmm. But if you think about it, like you said, it would probably make them feel like they have a community, or like, I don't know, a group that they can identify with, where they wouldn't be in games or whatever.
Right. Well, and I think in the movie it said that those classes weren't just isolated for Latino students. Mm-hmm. It was open for everybody. I think that if it was only for Latino students, then you would find that isolating thing. Yeah. But where that senator was saying that it was anti-American.
Yeah, that was really. Like, I was just like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the stupidest thing.
Really
That's one of the things I said in like in like my response to that part of it, is like that part of history is American history. Like Latino culture is American culture because they're part of America. So it's like to deny them learning about themselves is to deny them learning about a part of America that you have a right to learn. And we talked about when we had the class actually in Miller, like the right to see yourself in the curriculum. Right. That's like a human right to be able to identify, and it was, you could tell it was so strong for the students that like they're like, that teacher looks like me, even, you know, like that teacher knows where I'm from, and that really important aspect of seeing yourself in what you're learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when a teacher gets to know their students, it kind of goes into cultural heritage too, like being able to like get to know them and give them that space where they can share their heritage with the class is important. And
well, and at what point in history I'm slightly confused, because when the United States was first founded, it was advertised as a melting pot. Like you had all of these different cultures represented, and they were like, I don't know if they were promoted, but they were definitely there. But now we've shifted in history to saying like, oh, the United States has just this one white mainstream culture. Mm-hmm. Like when did that come into play? When did the melting pot go away? Because if he's saying that it's anti-American to embrace your culture, I don't understand, like, what culture are they supposed to embrace? The white culture? And then whose culture is that? Is that the United States culture? Or is that something that's manifested over time as certain cultures have died off? Mm-hmm. And then people have adapted to different communities?
I think, like, it's been going on for a really long time, because even, like, you had, like, I remember reading somewhere about, like, the potato, like the Irish potato.
That's what I was just thinking about, yeah.
And the Irish came in here and they're all in gangs and they're all bad news and all this stuff, and it was about the Irish. And now we kind of like, that seems
What?
ridiculous to think
so
that
they're
about
just
the Irish.
Yeah.
Like
You're
they just
thinking that about
they
the
just drink,
Latinos.
they're just part of our culture now.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's assimilation, if that's just they're further removed from, like each generation is further. I mean, I don't know. But it's been going on for a while. I mean, we have like the African Americans,
Exactly.
the people who came from like the Caribbean, people who come from South America, like they all get kind of marginalized at some point or another in United States history. But think about we put the Japanese in internment camps during World War II because of fear.
No, it's true. As you were saying that, I'm wondering like this idea that of America being founded as a melting pot. Like maybe the idea was there, but was it kind of a facade even at its
Is it like
roots?
propaganda?
Because even you think back like to the Civil War, like you're like, yeah, everyone can vote because they don't even consider a black person a human.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a similar idea of like, yeah, everyone is welcome if you're only thinking that everyone, speaking
If you're
about
going
people,
to
is
assimilate to
this
this
certain set of people. Yeah, to use that maybe everyone.
It's so interesting. It's like we saw that movie where the senator went into the classroom of the multi-ethnic classroom, and then the senator sat down, and the kids started asking questions, and the senator asked at one point, he's like, "Why is there not like Benjamin Franklin?"
But at that moment in time, I was like, oh my god.
That just made me think. I was like, it's like the victor always tells the history, and that's the one thing like that. It's so difficult to truly captivate in history. So history essentially is always like, not always, but it's like more often than not skewed, and it's terrible. Like I wish like, can you imagine like if history was like always told like as the truth, like 100%, like told the truth, like a book that has like contained the truth of like the past like 1,000 years. Like, can you imagine how different that would actually be and what our textbooks actually would say?
I think
You know what I mean?
you have like different truths for every side too.
That's
You know what I mean?
true,
Like,
yeah.
because like we have, we were the good guys in World War II, and we came in and saved the Jewish people from death, which kind of happened. But also, like if you read about what happened in Germany leading up to like the kind of like takeover and Hitler and what happened and how they got to that point, like it's really relatable to see how they got to that point. And so being able to look at like history from every different side of the story, like we didn't just come into America and create this great land. We came into America and killed
Yeah, there were
hundreds of
people
thousands
already
of
here.
Native Americans.
Right. I'm not saying that exactly. That's what I mean.
Discovered America.
It's terrible.
America wasn't discovered. There were already people here. Something that I wanted to bring up was, so we have these students in our classrooms that we want to embrace their cultures like they did in the movie, where you bring in their culture into the classroom and teach through their culture. And Jessica, you wrote in your post that that we should be educating our teachers about different cultures, or we should be self-educating ourselves about the different cultures that are coming into our classrooms and represent them in our classrooms and allow students to be culturally expressive. But what if, like in Arizona, the school system or the legislature doesn't allow you to do that? Like on a moral stance, I think I would push the boundaries of what my school system wanted and what my legislature wanted, and fight for the rights of my students. How would you guys view that? Would you, like, if you were told no, you're not allowed to let your students speak their native tongues in your classrooms because we're teaching English here? Like, would you press against that, or would you follow?
Oh, I would press.
You would press.
I just don't think that's
a
question.
It'd be a matter of like how to do it without being kind of like, because then you're not doing anybody any good.
I think it depends too on let's say that's a district policy or a state policy even.
Yeah,
It also depends on what your principal's perspective on it is. How much more you can get away
But
with,
then
kind of.
I guess then you have to advocate for it the right way, like to really like show like why we should fight for this and like why it's important for not just like the community but for America.
Yeah. Like I think it was really important in the video that people were accusing them that you are teaching students to revolt against American ideals, pretty much is what they were accusing them of, that you're teaching this hate speech in your classroom. And they were like, they think that, so we need to be extra careful to not be hateful about it, and be extra careful, like when we make our point, to say it in a very gracious way and not play into the stereotypes, because that just gives them, one thing to grab onto. And so I think that's really important in advocacy, like to be really careful to not, I don't know, to hold yourself the right way.
Really don't get like why there's such like a strong, I guess, like why people are so weird about wanting, I guess, the white way, like why it's
closed-minded.
Yeah, like I just don't. For me, I don't get it. So it's really hard to understand when people are so, like you said, closed-minded, because it's like not really hurting them.
No. Well, I think they see it as an attack on their opinions and their ways of life,
Right.
like their own culture.
Yeah.
So often, like you'll see, like there's been videos that we watched, like where like it was like some person applying in college, and she's like, yeah, like, I feel like discriminated against, like being like a white student, me having like a 3.8 GPA, like I can't get like
But you don't get any
perfect schools,
scholarship.
like and like in reality, like the statistics were like it was like way disproportionate. It was like colored people have like way higher like odds of like not going to college at all. So it was like like white people, like I think everyone always feels like they have like their own ego, and it always feels like they're like they'll take it personal. Like I mean, because I can at least like I can even like attest to like even myself just like taking like unnecessary things like personal. Like like I'll see like someone just like they'll just like walk by, and then I'll be like, oh, he gave that weird look at me, definitely because I just like I picked my nose right before like some stuff like that, like something like that, like so like like stupid personal stuff.
I've heard that argument so many times. Like when I was, I went to WSU and I went to Central. Now I'm here, and I don't know how many times I heard my friends who are really good people saying like, "Oh, look, there's all my scholarship money over there," and point to like a black person.
Really?
And like they truly thought that because they were white, middle class Americans, that they weren't getting scholarships because all the scholarship money was going towards like marginalized students, pretty much, students of color, different ethnicities, and that's just what they think, and I think it's ego related, like what you said, kind of, because it's like they didn't get the scholarship that they wanted, so they're gonna blame it on someone else, and that's what a lot of people do, like they blame their problems on other people instead of being like self-reflective. But I don't know. And these were good people. They're not racist people. They're not like they're very hardworking people. And they said it. And it's like, oh my god. And all you can do is just say, here's the actual stats on that if you want to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they just take it as like a.
They take it as like a personal
attack. As a personal attack, and so I think that kind of has to do with like cultures in school, like, well, English is the right way because I know 55-year-old white man, like, that's how I say it.
That's my way.
Yeah. And because they've always had like the power, kind of, and so they don't want to give that power up. Maybe I don't know. That's a theory.
It's literally like I can try to understand their huge waves of ignorance that they're so encompassed with of like this ultimate way to defensiveness practically. And the only thing that I can think of is like there's the debate like this goes into we might as well go to the question at a time. Mariah, she wrote online on a question of where she was saying, what is better, ethnic studies or English only? And then she continued also like, what is better, where we teach importance of their culture or only English? And then another question.
I don't know. I was just kind of like.
It was great. No, it was great. Yeah. What is better? Wait. Would teaching their culture separate, or would only teaching English hurt other cultures, dividing them anyway? So, yeah. But what do you guys think? What? This is a complicated question. But what is better? Would only teaching English hurt others of other cultures, or only teach English?
I think if you're only teaching English, you're not doing just like the language of English, or just like the culture of English.
Well, I don't know. When I was thinking of, I was like kind of thinking back to the movie. I guess when I was, I don't know, I was just pondering, and it's kind of like a debate, like whether like would, making sure that they all, keep their cultural background, like divide, everyone to where they couldn't be, I guess, a community, as in.
Like
Or-
if everybody just stayed with their own culture
Yeah.
and
never intermixed, I guess.
Yeah.
Or would it be better to maybe bring all the cultures together and teach them one culture? I don't know.
So that's ethnic studies class then, right? If you talk about bringing all the cultures together, that's like an ethnic studies class. Is that what you're saying?
like bringing, just not caring what kind of background they have and only focusing on English versus bringing their, really actually focusing on each of their cultures, I guess, versus.
I mean, I think it's like you have to have like a healthy mix.
Yeah.
Because if you're, like, we can't just be like, the United States has no culture, we accept all cultures, because, I mean, we should accept all cultures, but there would be no, like, organization, there would be no structure, really. It would be, I think it would be difficult to run a country, almost, if there was no kind of culture that you have to let people have their own culture though too.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. America is a country that's like less than like 300 years old, and it's like, and we're talking about already having like this like huge, anti-American like some stupid thing like totally established. It's like when it's like we're a country that's like built on other people's values and like the melting pot. Like that's literally like as a country, like people immigrated over here from so many other places. Literally every other like practically continent all came here. So it's like we are the most diverse country, and for us to like kind of blatantly ignore other people's values, that like we were practically founded on, because we were founded on other people's values. And America, because we're such a melting pot, and then for us to not be like taught the ways of how we were founded, and only based on like how like how one thinks that we are founded is totally different. If that makes sense. I like philosophy.
I think going back to kind of what you guys were talking about, like teaching English. I think teaching English is really important because, like, in America, we have to communicate,
Well, a universal language too.
Yeah, so it's really important. I think it would be dangerous, like, to just have the Spanish-speaking students in one class and the English-speaking students in another class and for the Spanish-speaking students to not learn English. I don't think that is ideal. I don't think that is the goal, but it's the kind of the culture behind it that is more important to bring all of it in. The language too, like bring their languages into the classroom, because I remember learning I don't know who has taken the SPED class yet, but one of the things that they talk about is like when you bring an accommodation for a student into the classroom, it generally serves the whole class. Like if you bring in a visual aid to help someone who's hard of hearing, that visual aid is probably going to help benefit the whole class, even though it was for the sake of the one individual, like it benefits the whole class. And I think that's the same with like bringing in other cultures and bringing in the other languages. It doesn't just benefit the people of that language, but it benefits the people of the other languages too. Like it's a benefit to the native English speakers to learn parts of another language or parts of that other culture, not just so that the immigrant students can see themselves in the curriculum, which is very huge, but also for the English-speaking students to be like involved with these other cultures, so that we don't end up with these old cranky white men that just
gonna blame it
think
all on
that
the old
English is the
cranky
way to
white
go because they've only ever learned about English, whereas everybody else has learned their language and English. There's kind of a give on both sides. Yeah,
I would just like to point out that we are now at 50 minutes.
Should we?
So I don't know, like, if we want to keep going, which we totally could, but for sake of Joy having to watch this,
Yeah.
do
Do you have some muddy questions? Do we have any others?
I wrote too many questions. One at 11:42, healthcare for undocumented citizens. We were all kind of fuzzy on what that entailed, and then also at 15:08, for students who are undocumented, when they find out at a later age, what can they do? Like how can they become documented? What is that process like?
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
So yeah. So if you can upload the video and then I'll comment on it.
Yep. I'm just gonna end it before I upload it. See you next week, Joy Wiggins.
Joy Wiggins.